Hey, what's up? Rumor has it that the auto farm placement function that currently exists in Age of Empires 4 is being introduced to Age of Empires 2 in the upcoming patch. This will be the latest in a long line of quality of life improvements that has come to Age of Empires 2 over the years. Today, we're ranking the top 5 changes made to the game to make it more enjoyable and accessible to all, also known as Top 5 Auto Everything.
Auto micro, auto macro, auto builds, auto micro, auto macro, auto everything, auto micro.
Number 5. Cartography for all. Back in 2018, so prior to the release of the Definitive Edition, Cartography was removed as a tech, and its effect, sharing in the vision of your allies, was made available upon building your first market. Then, in late 2022, full vision sharing from the start of a team game was introduced as the standard setting in a Definitive Edition ranked team game. In custom games, you can still play with the 2018 rules though, if you prefer that. And by the way, Portuguese got their bonuses shuffled around and can now build their structures from berry bush branches as compensation for everyone getting their old team bonus. So they're fine. Shared vision from the start makes coordination easier for everyone, but is perhaps most helpful in a situation where a more experienced player on the team can take a quick look at a less experienced player's base and offer some pointers, which can be real nice in a lower skill setting. For that reason, Carto for all gets the 5th spot on the list. Number 4. Small trees. This started out as a user-created graphics modification of the tree sprite in the game, which makes the trees smaller, more clearly contained within a specific tile, and for that reason, importantly, easier to specifically target with a click. There are situations where tasking villagers to chop specific trees is pretty important, whether it is to increase villager efficiency in general, free a stuck villager, or the map requires you to chop specific trees to unlock new areas of the map. After having looked around some online, the first small tree mod I could find reference to was the mod from around 2010. Back then, I was called Quaint by John Fastolf while struggling my way through the Loire Valley on easy difficulty and didn't even know what a build order was, so a graphics mod to increase villager efficiency wouldn't even have crossed my mind. So in other words, I have no first-hand experience from back then. If you do and know of an earlier small trees mod, please let me know below. These days, Small Trees has been elevated from mod status to becoming a full-fledged game option that can be turned on from the options menu. Thus qualifying as a quality of life feature introduced in the game, Small Trees takes spot number 4. Number 3. Auto Reseed. As I mentioned in the introduction, the farms are about to get a tweak, and that will not be the first time. Changing farms to make them more user-friendly has a long history in Age of Empires 2. From all the way back in Age of Empires 1, where farms were the clunkiest and most frustrating thing.
And here we have it. So this villager is stuck here because villagers cannot walk on farms.
The farms of this franchise has come a long way. AoE2 introduced walkable farms, which, beyond the increase in realism, helped a lot to reduce the clunkiness of AoE farming. In addition, the ability to right-click a fallow farm to quick reseed it made reseeding a lot easier. Conquerors introduced farm queuing, which allowed players to prepay for up to 40 farms. As a non-competitive player at the time, I certainly enjoyed this feature, but in hindsight, I realize what an institutionalized resource float this feature was, and that I probably would have steered way clear of it these days, even if it was the only aid for farm reseeding available. Fortunately though, it's not. With the Definitive Edition, the developers really leaned into simplifying or even removing mundane tasks to allow players to concentrate on the more essential parts of the game. Auto farm reseeding was probably the clearest example of this new philosophy. While this is a feature that must be used with some care, given wood can be subtracted automatically from the stockpile, and it really sucks to get a QoL denied because a auto-reseeding farm scrapes the stockpile bare of wood. It can be turned off if necessary, and I think most players today will agree it makes for a much better experience. Auto-reseeding farms takes spot number 3 on the list. Number 2. Smart production. Perhaps I'm cheating a little bit here, because I'm about to mix 3 concepts which was introduced into the game at different times. But they're so closely linked, I found it was better this way. It all has to do with how easy it is to produce units. Clearly an important task in a game of AoE. The first component of smart production is the multi-queue. This means that if you queue several units while having a group of production buildings selected, the units will be spread out among the available facilities in the selection. This feature was introduced in the HD edition of the game, but for most of the 2010s, players on the Voobly platform, which included most of the professional scene, kept playing with single queue, which requires the player to use cycle hotkeys to cycle through available buildings and queue units into the different queues manually. One of the most definite things about the definitive edition was that the single queue was definitely dead. But in addition, the last 2 components of smart production were introduced: Smart Queue and Select All hotkeys. Smart Queue is the next logical step from multi-queue, where multi-queue will simply divide new units among available queues evenly. Smart Queue will take into account which items are already in these queues and prioritize queues which will complete new items first. So as an example, if you have 2 stables, one just having queued a Cavalier, and another stable where the Paladin research has just started, the next 4 Cavaliers you ask for will all be queued in the first stable, as 5 Cavalier will train before the Paladin tech comes in. The introduction of the Select All hotkeys, so an example would be Select All stables, made production more streamlined still by providing an easy way to access all queues of the desired type. Together, this modern smart production has made the game easier to manage and, I assume most would agree, more enjoyable. For that reason, smart production takes a strong second place. A few honorable mentions before we look at number 1. Auto Scout, a feature introduced in the definitive edition, allowing a starting scout to automatically scout the map, according to an algorithm also used by the AI to scout the map. I think this feature strikes a nice balance between being generally useful on lower levels, occasionally useful in higher levels, but still suboptimal enough that there's still clear incentive to do manual scouting. Drop off. This is a rather new feature that has been in the game for a few months now, and seems to have been received rather positively. Despite the fact that this is actually a quality of life change that has some impact on balance, as it particularly favors civs that are prone to force dropping, such as Chinese and Aztecs. Last among the honorable mentions is one that I'm personally particularly fond of: the little civ icons added to the scoreboard. More often than I would like to admit, I forget which civ I'm up against in the middle of a game. Previously, you would have to go into the diplomacy overview to check your opponent's civ unless you could click one of the opposing units or buildings. Now, after the introduction of these little icons, you can simply have a quick look down in the scoreboard and the artwork will tell you, as long as you know the heraldry by heart, that is. Number 1. Villager Task Queue. In my opinion, this was hands down the most revolutionary change that came with the definitive edition. Being able to schedule a series of tasks for villagers, thus eliminating the constant babysitting of builders to make sure they go back to work after the building is done, being able to queue sheep and other animals to reduce decay, queue outposts across the map, order all the damaged trebuchets to be repaired, one after another, build a dock, then go shore fish, which it is real nice to be able to drop off in the dock, by the way. The list goes on and on. And the more innovative you get, the more efficiency you can squeeze out of this feature. Shift queuing to make sure villagers forage through the berry bushes in the most efficient way, or chop trees for maximum output, has gone from something only the hardest of the nerds would even think about, to something average players do on the regular. While the positioning of some of the other items on this list can certainly be debated, I'm pretty confident when I say that queuing actions for villagers is the #1 quality of life feature ever added to Age of Empires 2.
How to micro, how to macro, let's break it out to everything.